Hello, I'm Hilton Supra, the Vice Chairman of Student Group. I'm looking forward to interviewing today Sami Khan, the CEO and co-founder of Atlas Earth. This is where we interview people who are changing the world, people that are inspiring us with their achievements and creativity and acumen with the use of technology. In our previous interviews, Dinner Squad and I have interviewed over 200 most amazing people. And this has achieved over 13 million views on YouTube. Now, this interview series of Citiesabc is in partnership with our platforms, Open Business Council and fashionabc.org, all fourth industrial revolution-based platforms utilizing technology that employ the use of truth and trust, blockchain, and the development of data analytics, Web3, AI, and machine learning. So today, we're talking with Sami Khan. Sami, welcome.
Hey, Hilton, thank you for having me today.
I'm really delighted to be able to speak to you. Sami, your experience as a growth marketer specialized in helping, early stage consumer facing products where you sort of launch them and scale them to millions of customers is well known. I mean, you were early days, you were founder of Staircase Digital to help early stage startups find customers on Facebook, Instagram, and Snapchat. And the company really grew rapidly, where you helped over 130 plus different startups in the United States and internationally validate the product demand and their positioning and the ability to scale in the market. Now you are working and focusing your time on bridging the world between reality and the physical world with Atlas Reality Inc., which you founded back in 2016, which I think is very, really early for this you're in. And you pioneered in owning virtual real estate, simulating the real world where the players can claim land exactly where they are standing in the real world, where Atlas players can get some form of cash reward for every parcel of land that they own within the Atlas Metaverse. This is really, really exciting. But your journey here, Sami, tell us a little bit about where you grew up, your education, and what really got you into tech.
Yeah, I think it was a very unplanned journey into tech, as I think most of us are. Just most like anybody else. When I was in college, I was doing pre-med, taking physics and chemistry courses, thinking that I was going to be a doctor or potentially a lawyer. I do remember the day I asked one of my law professors after class, I said, because he was an adjunct professor where he was a lawyer after hours. And I said, would you do this again? And he said, absolutely not. And then I said, okay, well, I remember, it was binary. That moment, I was like, well, I'm not going to be a lawyer then. So I got my major at Tulane University in New Orleans, which is actually where I was born and raised, New Orleans, Louisiana. And I got my marketing. I majored in marketing there with a minor in business law. And, I would say that marketing is one of those things that you could get a degree in, but it really doesn't define your career in the way that you're getting a degree in engineering or getting a degree in being a doctor could, right? Or going through med school, because marketing is moving so quickly. Marketing changes, frankly, every week. And so, I took that underlying understanding of what I learned in school. And then when the opportunity presented itself to me, there were some startups. I moved to Los Angeles. And there were just more startups in that ecosystem. And one of that was Acorns, which now is a multi-billion-dollar fintech app in the United States.
No, but when you joined Acorns, how big were they when you started?
I was the first marketing hire. It was a handful of engineers, a designer, and the co-founders. It was less than 10 people. And, it's really interesting. A company like Acorns, they actually were founded in 2012, just like you mentioned how, Atlas, we were founded quite a few years ago. But, really cutting edge companies like Acorns that are true disruptors that had to build their own broker dealer, they take years before the customers even get to interface with the brand, right?
Mm-hmm.
So even though I joined Acorns in the summer of 2014, Acorns was actually around since 2012, just quietly building.
Mm-hmm.
But I just happened to be at the right time in the right place where the product was done, and they needed a marketer to help scale it from 0 customers. And so I was lucky enough to scale them from 0 to 3.5 million investment accounts. We became the fastest growing brokerage firm in American history, and believe it or not, Acorns actually, we launched a year before Robinhood. So in many ways, we paved the way for what became, I think, mobile first fintech.
And about the same, what was the time that you moved as the move to, I think it was Honey?
Yeah, so I don't know. Honey is actually something used internationally as well. The browser extension, they got acquired by PayPal in 2021 for $4 billion, something crazy like that.
Yeah.
But while I was at Acorns, about a year in, I was continuing to work at Acorns, but I wanted to challenge myself. And this is something that you'll probably understand about me is, marketing is all about challenging yourselves. Like I said, in school, it can only teach you so much. Marketing is all about, gaining the experience on the field. So Acorns was a mobile first, mobile only product. And I came across the Honey team, who they were a team of 5 people at the time. Similar story, have been around since probably 2011, 2012. Initially went viral, but then didn't really have much after that. When I met the team, it was 5 people, and I talked to George and Ryan, the founders, and I said, "Look, guys, I think I can blow this up." And for me personally, I wanted to prove to myself that I could blow up a product that was on desktop, right? Because Honey was a desktop browser extension, whereas Acorns was a mobile fintech app. And I just wanted to prove to myself that I had the ability to more than one trick, so to speak. So
Yeah.
really got to roll up my sleeves and figure out how to grow that type of business as well.
Mm-hmm. From the time you're talking about, 2014, 16, etc. These were the early days of what you call digital marketing. And the digital marketing techniques, aren't necessarily just SEO.
Right. So you're mentioning something really interesting, Hilton, is I used to be, even before this, in pay-per-click ads on Google, SEM, right? Your standards. And believe it or not, the entire Acorns pro forma and projections were built on SEM, search engine marketing. Immediately we knew there was a problem because we were, Acorns is a micro investing service where it's spare change. So the investing keywords, Hilton, these were not people looking to invest spare change. And the volume of those search terms were so low that we would never hit our pro forma projections just marketing on SEM. And so, but at that time, people weren't marketing on scale on Instagram, on Facebook for apps, right? Like if you recall back then, fan pages were all the rage. People were running ads to gain followers on fan pages and things like that. But app marketing was not a thing in 2014. Tracking apps, tracking installs all the way down the funnel was not even a thing. And so it was one of those things where I think if Acorns was a year earlier, we would have never worked. But it was, to your point, 2014 was that moment when Facebook and Instagram really started to let everyday marketers get in on the platform and try, their hand at marketing apps. And at the same time, there were new products that came out that allowed marketers to holistically track performance. And it was just that, integration of confluence of products that really allowed me to say, hey, this is working, and double down on it. Because we ended up spending, hundreds of thousands, if not eventually millions of dollars a month on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, etc. But yeah, you're totally right. 2014, this was the moment that app marketing in particular became, you know, more started to get established. Because before that, it did not exist.
But this was the nascent growth of the ideas of cashback apps.
Yes.
Can you explain that to our audience so they really understand what that really meant in the early days?
Yeah, of course. So, you know, I think let's talk about cashback apps, because I think everybody now knows about Ebates, Rakuten, maybe Honey. But, you know, these brands, once you have the ability to track if a customer spent money with you, brands became willing to pay other companies for bringing them customers. And so marketing, even now, Hilton, is changing from this notion of paying for eyeballs. It's switching from paying to eyeballs to paying for results. And I believe fully, and Atlas, we have a platform called AMP, the Atlas Merchant Platform, where we've partnered with, you know, retail stores where they pay us per result. But we'll talk about that in a second. But going back, these cashback apps, there became a whole economy where brands like Nike and Sephora, you name it, were saying, instead of paying for that, you know, the ad on the side of the bus, I'm going to pay Honey X% when I know they brought me a customer, right? And what that enabled Honey to do, and these other cashback apps, is basically create the foundation of what I consider the Web3 ethos, which is, hey, you get a piece of what you brought in. And ultimately, if we take out the conversations of blockchain and all the technological ways Web3 works, I think my firm belief about what the Web3 ethos is giving people on the internet a cut of what their participation has generated, right? This is kind of, sorry, I'm kind of describing this in a more holistic manner, but, you know, on Facebook, every quarter you're making Facebook $6, more than that sometimes, right? And what do you get from it? Nothing. You don't get anything. But the notion of cashback apps, that I think is almost the foundation of what I believe is going to be the future of Web3, which is cashback apps like Honey and Rakuten. They don't say it so overtly, but it's basically like, hey, you spent money at Samsung. Samsung gave us 3%, so we'll give you 1%. That's the foundation of a cashback app, right?
Yeah, it's a reward mechanism now today. That's the ability to understand what the value in an engagement is, an acquisition of a client, and then a reward for that engagement. So it's, that's
and
that
everyone
is
could
the evolution.
do this. Right, and everyone should do this. Is the internet? You know, people always talk about protecting their data. As a marketer, I don't believe that people really care about the, you know, ones and zeros of the data itself. I think what they care about is that if you're going to make money off my data, I should get something for it. And I think that, like, I don't really think people care about the privacy aspect as much as they care about the, hey, that's not right that you're taking my info and selling it and I'm not getting anything for it.
Yes.
So,
I mean, basically you being the commodity and just for your engagement, and you're not being rewarded for that. So that's and that's really, really important going forward. As platforms now today that will succeed will be the ones that build a community of people that who when they engage, they get rewarded for that engagement. It's not necessarily just purely the fact that they buy something, is that they actually contribute something to the ecosystem and get rewarded for that anyway.
1000%. I mean, you look at, like, so this is actually why I got into gaming. There are game companies, you know, I'm sure you guys know or probably played Candy Crush. I think it's been around for 10 years. It still makes $1.5 million a day. I mean, it's making crazy money. And what I like to tell people is, when you play these games, you're playing them for the utility of enjoyment, but you don't really have anything to show for it other than your level 26 or level 260 or whatever you are. But this company has made, in some cases, 50, 60, 70, $80,000 off of you. And I'm not saying that, look, you shouldn't pay for entertainment. People do it all the time. But I think that this uncapped I'll use the word greed. I'm not trying to attack Candy Crush here because it's a business model, but I think this notion of I'm going to make everything and you're going to get nothing, I think it needs to go away, and I think it will go away.
Absolutely. I mean, from personal experience, the amount of subscriptions I have for various apps on my phone, if I had to go back and have a look and add up all the amount of money that I'm spending on a monthly basis on all my apps, it's a big number. And then I look at it and I say, okay, why am I doing this? What am I getting back from, having XYZ app? Yes, it gives me great utility, but I'm not being rewarded for that level of engagement with it whatsoever, which actually means that sometimes I'm reluctant to use it, or I will find something else which will be free.
Yeah. Or, exactly. And then, or if you use an app that you like, I think TikTok's getting a lot of heat right now, in particular, because people love the app, but then they're going, wait a second, who has my data and what are they doing with it? And so we're really starting to see that come to the forefront a lot more. And so for Atlas, we said, why don't we just make that the core of our mission, which is to build real value in the virtual world? And let's just, when you buy a parcel of land, so our entire economy is around Atlas bucks. And so players can earn Atlas bucks by going shopping. Players can earn Atlas bucks by watching ads, right? And so we're making money from all these things. But what we're doing is that Atlas bucks can be used on virtual land, which is cool and gamified, but then that virtual land gives you cash back. So it's a much more complicated, layered approach than something like Honey or Rakuten. But this is the experience we've designed, which is, okay, let's make a game where the economy is built around this notion of cash back, because that's going to be the future.
Yes. So when you started Atlas Earth back in 2016, is that correct?
So our company, we started working on location-based games in 2016. So Atlas Earth, actually, we started working on in 2020. But before that, we've actually built a location-based gaming platform for our own private use since 2016. And our entire thesis was the future of location-based games will involve virtual real estate. And so we actually built and released our first game, which it took us years. And Hilton, this, like, momentum, it takes time to build, right? So our first game took 3 years to build. I don't come, as you can tell, Honey and Acorns, these are not gaming companies. I don't come from a gaming company. As a matter of fact, I tried so many times to take money from gaming investors to get gaming company people to join me on this mission. And everyone, frankly, laughed at me. And they said, A, it's too hard to do it from the ground up. B, why would you change a model that's making millions and hundreds of millions of dollars? You don't need to be. So I think there's that legacy kind of arrogance. But when we started, we basically firmly believed that virtual real estate, if games like Pokemon Go was using the real world as a game board, the next obvious leap was using the real estate on the game board as piece of the game, right? And Pokemon Go didn't really do that. And even to this day, early on, we were scared. I don't want to curse, but we were scared a lot that, companies like Niantic would look at what we're doing and go, wow, we're going to do that too. We're shocked. It's 2022 and they haven't. And so we become we've become the leader in virtual real estate,
Yes. But how do you make that connection between the virtual real estate and the real world? What's that connecting piece?
Yep. So effectively in our games, they're all location-based games. And so, like I mentioned with Pokemon Go, so when you open the game, you see, just like Pokemon Go, you see the streets right outside your house. You see the shadow or the overlay of the structure of your house. And what I've always said as a marketer is, it's hard to teach people new behaviors, but it's not hard for people to adopt based on something they already relate to. And what people already relate to is where they live, where they work, where they play. And so for us, our first game was called Atlas Empires, and it was I grew up playing Age of Empires, which is this strategy game. And I thought, man, wouldn't it be cool if you could play a strategy game, but your base was your house? Because then I relate to it so much more, because now you're not just attacking my base that lives on my computer, you're attacking my house, you know? And that was really the thesis of like, hey, when I relate to something, I'm going to be more literally and figuratively invested into that. And so we built a platform that was like, hey, when you go on your travels, you can claim outposts, right? Because what cooler thing to do than know when I'm traveling for my honeymoon or whatever, right? I'm doing something. So now I have a memory related to this gameplay mechanic. When
Yes.
I'm at home, I'm building my base because it's my home base. I mean, these are things, so we built a platform that allowed us to gamify virtual real estate on
Okay.
mobile, leveraging, your phone's GPS, which is ultimately the best way you relate to the real world, because people use Google Maps and all this, and
Yeah.
Foursquare was big at a time. So we just built on that foundation. And then
Mhm.
when we saw people selling random virtual land, right, like Sandbox, Decentraland, I immediately knew in my head and my heart as a marketer that that wouldn't work, because A, desktop is a shrinking audience. So asking people to engage in a shrinking audience is silly.
Mhm.
And B, now I need to teach you about the physics of a brand new world, right? If you buy land in Sandbox, what is that? I got to teach you that. I got
Just
to
buying
teach you.
data. You're just buying
Right,
data.
right. But when I say buy virtual land right where you're standing, people get it. And the other thing I like kind of joking about is even flat earthers will agree that virtual land is limited in quantity. you know, so like when you hear about virtual worlds, inevitably someone says, well, what's stopping them from making more? And
Mhm.
people will say, oh, they have a DAO or they have this, but the truth is nothing. you know they can print more if they want to, but the world is not changing in volume. And so in Atlas Earth, when you're buying virtual land on a first come, first served basis, if you go down the street and buy up the McDonald's down the street, that McDonald's is gone. You know, no one
Yeah.
else can get that McDonald's. So that's where I think it gets interesting.
So, how did you start? Did you start with your local area, or did you start where you know your customers would be? What was the strategy for turning the shadow of your home or your local area
Right.
into VR?
So this is what took us, the better part of 3 years to figure out, Hilton. Um, so the answer is, again, and I hope you're not sick of me saying this, I approach everything coming from my experience in marketing. If we did things on a localized level, this would have failed, because hyper targeting localized is really expensive. And so what we basically did for Atlas Empires was we built the mapping platform ourselves, and this took years. We layered it on top of OpenStreetMaps. My co-founder, I'm not even qualified to answer or talk about the technology that it went into.
Yeah. All that
Basically,
geospatial technology is just like
yeah, yeah, yeah. And basically my team somehow created an overlay where you can buy, like in Atlas Empires, I believe it was a 30-foot by 30-foot plot of land, and that was mirrored on top of a location. And they had some sort of, coordinate system that knew exactly which parcels of plots you could buy and how it overlaid with OpenStreetMaps,
Mhm.
right? But the system they built was configurable. So in Atlas Empires, a plot of land was 30, it was 100 by 100. But in Atlas Earth, a plot of land is 5 by 5, right? So these are the cool things that we built a configurable system based on the game, but it was all the underlying tech that we've been building. So to
Mhm.
answer your question, what we did for Atlas Empires, we did a lot of research. Now remember, I wasn't coming from the gaming industry. And so I was figuring this all out. I was calling people from the game industry, and everyone told me launch in Australia because it's an English speaking market. It has the best kind of indications for how you'll perform in the US. Apparently the US is 75% of 60 to 75% of all English speaking revenues in mobile. So that's your, where you eventually want to be, but you don't want to make your mistakes there. Optimize the game in Canada and Australia. And I've heard about gaming companies like Supercell and others that did this strategy. So I was literally reading about this and taking that same application and applying it. So we released Atlas Empires in Australia. It did really well. And then we eventually released it in the US. But again, this was we had to, we released market by market because we had to make sure that the land stuff worked. And we ran into some really unique issues. Like when we released in, I believe it was Switzerland or Norway, the curvature of the earth was causing some of the parcels to not be the same sizes, and
Of course, yes. The further north,
Yeah.
it's all based on the size of the land is based on
Yeah.
the projection, which
Yeah.
basically means
So
the further you get away from the equator, the larger
right.
Yeah.
Right. So there was just a lot of complexities we had to learn about, and optimize, and it's things nobody will ever tell you. But yeah, it's been fun to do that and figure that out. But then Atlas Earth, we're only available in the US right now. We already have over 1 million customers. And, we are being a little more cautious because we want to make sure that whenever you're dealing with giving people back, money that or virtual rent that can be redeemed for money, different countries have different laws. So obviously in the United States, I was the most familiar with the US laws and regulations. So I talked to the lawyers that I used to work with at Acorns, and we were most comfortable launching in the United States. So in the Atlas Earth, we're kind of working backwards where we launched in the US first, but we're very eager to launch in Australia, Canada, UK, within the next 6 months, probably.
So from a legal perspective, I mean, I'm just taking a hypothetical.
Yeah.
I go and buy a piece of the White House. Legally, can I do that?
Yes.
Why?
So remember, we own the platform. So we're very clear in our terms that we're not selling a piece of the White House. We're selling a digital version or a portion that represents the White House in our platform, right? And specifically to your point on the copyright section, government structures like the White House are, from a copyright perspective, are publicly accessible. Now, there are certain IPs that I think we would probably have to be more cautious about. So, for example, my lawyers told me that while the Eiffel Tower is not copywritten, the lights or the light show at the Eiffel Tower is, I think, property of an artist and their family or something. So there's a lot of complexities. But, look, specifically with landmarks, we've actually roped them off because we plan to release them one by one. So today, you actually can't, well, you can go to the White House, but in your example, you could not actually buy the White House today. And it functions as a double protection. One is we want to group all of the White House together because I don't think it's, from a gamification standpoint, it's very cool to own 1/300th of the White House. We want somebody, a big whale, to be able to win an auction and own the White House outright. And number two, by releasing it on a case-by-case basis, we can have our lawyers run checks on copyrights and things like that before we release the landmarks.
Yeah. So let's take a hypothetical. I purchase a piece of real estate on Atlas. How do I get a yield from that or get rewarded for owning that piece of land? What's the economics? Ownership.
Yeah. And now you're digging into the great questions. And Hilton, what I'll say first of all is we make sure that we don't call it a yield for many reasons, because you've seen unregulated spaces. I don't like FTX where they say yields and things like that, and really it was just a Ponzi scheme. What we do is we've run a model of how much money we make from advertisers, how much money we make from all sorts of things. And we basically took a hyper conservative portion of that and we split it up. Now, it allows us to understand effectively what I'm saying is I know how much money per year I can give back per parcel. And that's done because we're making, quite frankly, hundreds of thousands of dollars from advertisers. But we didn't want to just say, we're going to give you back money from advertisers, because that's not very gamified. That's not very, it's not building a foundation of something cool. And so what we've done is we've kind of run the math on our side, and it's almost like an insurance kind of piece where we've run the risk, we've run the, not the risk, but how, like, we understand how much money are we making in totality, how much money would 4 million parcels generate, and how much of the hundreds of thousands of dollars a month can we give back sustainably. And then we do backstop our economy. And you're probably the first to hear about this, but for us as a business, we're selling land that has so much margin. We actually take a bit of our margin and put it aside in instruments that make us money. And so that backstops the entire economy, in the sense of, if the advertisers paid less or dried up, we at least have this mechanism that generates us money that will cover the cashback portion. With that being said, our terms are pretty clear, and we try to make it pretty clear, if you get a chance to download Atlas Earth, that we are not guaranteeing this money forever. Obviously, like, this would be 1000% worst case scenario. We still say play Atlas Earth for the enjoyment of the game, not because it's an investment instrument. Yeah. Right? Do not look at it as an investment instrument. Look at it as a game that earns you cash back and rewards you for your participation. Yeah. But we, I feel, I mean, look, we're going through a crazy bear market, and we're doing really well in terms of, like, our cashback redemptions and things like that. So we're growing through this kind of bear market, which enables us to actually get out of it and be stronger. And believe it or not, like, when I say we backstop our economy, people have come to me from the crypto world and said, hey, you should take some of this economy that you've backstopped on your, the Atlas side, and put it into crypto yield farming and things like that. And we're like, absolutely not, because I saw that as a huge risk. But there are income generating ETFs on the market that have been around for 15, 20 years. So for us, it's about, if you look, our biggest complaint is people who download Atlas Earth, they think that, oh, this is a way to get rich. We've purposely, look, this as a marketer, I could have said, you make 10%, 12%, we don't say that. We say, like, it's barely a percent unless you watch ads and participate in the game. Why did I do that? Because I don't want to bring people in under the illusion of get rich quick or get rich, right? My entire thesis and ethos, and I know my founding teams, is we just want you to participate in the game that gives you something back. And by us being upfront about that and being super, super conservative, like, we're talking about your lands make you 1% cash back unless you participate in the game. By the way, you could watch ads to supercharge your rent. You could go on scavenger hunts. So there are people who in our game could make their money, could make money back within 4 to 5 years, which, by the way, is a better return than real world real estate if you participate in the game and watch ads consistently, right? And that's pretty clear.
It's your level of engagement of, your engagement in your virtual property is directly proportional to the rewards that you would get.
Correct. So if you did nothing, if you did absolutely nothing, and you just bought land in Atlas Earth, the lands generate, each parcel of land on average generates about 3.5 pennies a year. Okay. Right? So from a cashback perspective, that's nothing. However, I just said, if you do nothing. So if you do nothing, this is a cashback app that's probably more conservative than any cashback app out there. However, if you want to supercharge your rent, you can come in every hour and watch an ad. You can go on scavenger hunts and pick up diamonds and cash in those diamonds for more Atlas bucks. I mentioned our retail partnerships. You can connect your Visa or MasterCard to our retail platform and go shop at retail partnerships, retail partner locations, and they'll give you Atlas Bucks for shopping with them. So you can see how, all of these things combined is where it starts getting really interesting, because our goal is to allow and enable players to earn free land that continues to give them cash back, but that land is not paid by them. It's paid by the advertisers or the affiliates or the brands.
So hypothetically, if I am a big brand and I have brand stores, physical brand stores, and I basically want to own those stores in the virtual world, the user experience on Atlas is such that if I wanted to go and purchase XYZ product from that brand, okay, like the sneakers or a handbag or even an experience, I can have a VR experience through my mobile of that particular shop.
Almost. So eventually that is on the roadmap. However, today, remember, we're talking about mixing the real world and the virtual world. And this is what is really exciting for us, Hilton, and this is something we patented. So we are the first game. Remember how I said the gaming people laughed at me? Well, I come from fintech. We became the first gaming company to have enablement deals with Visa and soon with MasterCard. So what happens is players can actually connect the Visa card that you use every day to Atlas via Visa. Okay. So basically we work with Visa.
You become a merchant, just a merchant.
So correct. So now Visa says Hilton's gamer, whatever your gamer username is, ID is, connected their Visa card. For example, one of our merchant partnerships is Sonic, who sells hamburgers here in the United States. They have 3,500 locations. Sonic sent us all their physical locations. We loaded them into our platform. Now, let's say you happen to be a mile away from a Sonic when you open Atlas Earth. We know that because we know your location and we know Sonic's location. So we say, hey, Hilton, if you go and spend and buy a hamburger at Sonic, Sonic will give you, in this case, 1 Atlas buck per dollar spent. So what happens?
As a reward, yes.
So remember, each parcel of land is 100 Atlas bucks. So now you were like, well, I was going to get lunch anyways from McDonald's. I was in the mood for a hamburger. I go to the Sonic instead. I spend 20 bucks. I'm of 20% on my way to another free parcel of land that gives me cash back. All because I bought a hamburger I bought myself and my friend a hamburger meal from Sonic, right? And all of that is done completely seamlessly. What I mean by that is all this player did was connect their Visa card and accept a mission to go to Sonic. Then when you swipe that same Visa card at Sonic, in real time, you get your Atlas bucks. There's no waiting, there's nothing. And it's amazing. Right. And so that's what I mean when we say combining, because the Sonic is in the real world. You're in Atlas. But you just got something in Atlas for being or participating in the economy in the real world. And that's where I think what we're doing is so unique is, and I said this at a recent Metaverse conference, is where the Metaverse really becomes interesting is when real world economies start flowing through it, right? We can't live in this world of constant speculation. Like, why did Decentraland and Sandbox fail? They were huge when everybody was making paper money, right? Oh, I bought it for 500 and I sold it for 2,500. That's great.
Yeah.
But when that musical chair stops, it's over.
Absolutely.
But when you have real brands paying me, and I'm basically effectively giving you a piece of what they're paying me for you going and shopping with them through virtual land that gives you cash back, we've built an economy. An actual economy. And so that's where I think this becomes so sustainable.
I mean, like the flip side of this would be that I could go and visit a retail store. I could, in the virtual space, go and acquire some good or service from that virtual store, which is a replica, because they're pretty standardized brand stores. and then I'll be able to very easily get delivery of that in the real world. Purchase something in the virtual world and get delivered.
Absolutely. And that's part of our plans as well, right? Is the ability to utilize real world spaces, because I don't need to remember where the McDonald's is in the real world. If I open the app in the real world, I know I'm standing in a McDonald's, and there could be augmented experiences when I'm there, right? And that's where I'm kind of giving away more than I want to on our roadmap, but this is totally where we're going, which is this notion of potentially virtual franchise owners, right? Look, if McDonald's is eventually gives me percentage of money for people buying a burger at this McDonald's, and Hilton happens to own the virtual version of that McDonald's, what's stopping me from giving you a couple basis points of the actual transaction? I mean, this is all what our technology is capable of doing. And I think that's where it gets really exciting.
Absolutely. No, we're on the same page. I think about these things all day.
Yeah, no, it's super interesting.
So, Sami, what do you think of the main challenges and opportunities using the technology, in particular, obviously using blockchain, looking at data, using AI? You're, looking at augmented experiences, using Metaverse or Web3 technologies, and of course the global economy. So where do you see this going in the next 5 or 10 years?
Well, I think that this is definitely a long-term bet, right? The internet.com bubble was in the late 90s. And I think finally in 2020s, we're getting to the ubiquity of using the internet. And so, I would say if this kind of Wild West is anything, we're still in the 90s part of the Metaverse blockchain. I think from a challenge perspective, earlier in this conversation, I mentioned how Sandbox, Decentraland being on desktop was a bad move because, desktop audience is shrinking. The other challenge, though, is mobile is effectively a monopoly, Apple and Google. And so with blockchains, with auctions, with things like this that are typically digital currencies that are highly not regulated by a governmental standpoint, but regulated by Apple, regulated by Google, I think there's a lot of changes that need to happen in the app store ecosystems, because I fully believe that the largest adopter, I've mentioned this before, we're actually the largest virtual real estate metaverse on the planet. We sell a new virtual real estate parcel every 4 seconds. We've got over 1 million customers already in the US. And all of that is because we're on mobile. And I believe that to be successfully, my goal is in the next 3 years to get us to 100 million people on Atlas. But you're not going to do that without, pretty much a deep penetration in the mobile market. But we need to continue adding features. I want the ability for players to buy improved lands, sell their lands. And these are hurdles because Apple wants and Google wants 30% of everything. And how do you build a platform where Hilton can sell his land and make money when there's basically a 30% handicap on the transaction, even without me making any money, right? Because I'm in business too. Like somebody's got to pay for these server costs. So I think that is that from a global standpoint, there needs to be a change, or at least an exception for blockchain and metaverse products, because it is just not the same industry. So, and then I think, from a blockchain perspective, it's a publicly distributed database, for the lack of a better term. And I think right now the mentality is people who are pro blockchain, they use blockchain like a Thor's hammer. Every problem is solved by blockchain. And if let's just use PlayStation. I'm a proud owner of a PS5. Like, those games are not exclusively server based, right? There's gigabytes of that game that live on the PlayStation hard drive locally. So I always use that example as saying, if the internet has advanced the way it has, games still share some some local and some server authentication. So why would blockchain be any different? So I feel like the blockchain purists need to, I'm not trying to be offensive, but I think they need to grow up a little, which is blockchain is, I think, an evolution of, from just a distributed public decentralized way of storing data. So it's not just Jeff Bezos at AWS deciding if he's going to continue your services because you've offended him, and or whatever, right? That's, I think, the thesis. But at the end of the day, it's a more expensive, less efficient AWS right now, right? And so again, I'm not a technologist. I'm saying this from what I understand. So if these server authenticated experiences that exist for PlayStation and Xbox are any example, I think that we need to understand that blockchain is going to be an element of future product integrations. But this notion of 100% on blockchain, to me, doesn't seem like it makes sense, for a lot of reasons, from an adoption perspective, but also just from a logic perspective. So, again, I know that was a very compound answer, but my answer is, the legacy companies like Apple and Google, they're going to need to play nicer, or they're going to need to get out the way. I don't know which one is more likely. And then on the other side, I think the people who are the blockchain evangelists need to really dig deep, step away from the speculative side of the world, and ask themselves, what is the value prop of blockchain, and how do I use it in a sustainable way that's actually going to be useful for the majority of technology companies to adopt, not because I love blockchain, which seems to be the answer.
No, I mean, the only way in which the reward mechanism will be effectively using the blockchain technology is when there's the level of adoption there and a need that the customer is now wanting to verify those rewards and know that those rewards are theirs.
100%. And when you get to that scale, that's when it gets interesting, because there's not going to be more Bitcoin being printed, right? And so if you get 1 billion people using that, yeah, that's when Bitcoin gets interesting in terms of value. But you have to have a value and a use case.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Sami, thank you very much indeed for a really, really, really enjoyable an hour spent with you, and very, very exciting what you're doing with Atlas. And I would really, really like to come back and talk to you about this another time,
Sure.
the next iteration. So I think this is a very important area, particularly people that have, as I said, pioneering with new technologies and looking at the world in which the participants in that space can be rewarded. I think this is a fantastic model where the engagement is rewarded. And, and that's how I think the future will be, where you own your own identity and you're rewarded for your engagement with the community or the communities that you're working in.
I'm really glad you're saying that. I mean, that is the crux of why I wake up in the morning. So absolutely. It's good to know there are other people that feel this way. Look, this has been an extremely enjoyable conversation. Thank you so much for basically having me and entertaining all my crazy ideas about where the future is going. And, it's good to see you not laughing me off the screen. So
no, not at all. I'm intrigued all the time. Tell me a little bit more. If people want to get hold of you, how do they find Atlas and yourselves and your colleagues?
Yeah, so the best place to look is on the App Store and Google Play. Just type in Atlas Earth and you'll find our app there. We have a live chat with our customer service team at any time through the app. So basically any questions. Honestly, my customer service team hits me up all the time when people have ideas and stuff. So believe it or not, I'm always listening through those channels. And you can always find me on LinkedIn, Sami Khan, or www.atlasearth.com.
Excellent. Thank you very much indeed for your time, Sami. I look forward to talking to you again. Take care.
Thanks, Eldon. Really appreciate it.
If you're interested in knowing more about citiesabc.com with openbusinesscouncil.org and fashionabc.org, go to our platforms, as well as you can find me on social media and DM me, Hilton Supra, on Twitter, LinkedIn, and on Instagram. And do go to the other interviews we have done on YouTube. And don't forget to like and comment. Thank you very much for your time and engagement with this interview on Cities ABC.